Alrighty, everybody, let's get to it. We are going live with another round of Astro-Babble. Thank you to everybody who continues to support the work. I am loving that you're so actively sharing the posts and sending your friends and family over to give me birth times as well. I appreciate it. So we're doing another 8 charts this morning. We're going to be looking at the natal chart. So that is a kind of X-ray snapshot at the time of somebody's birth, when I'm given their exact birth date, place, and time. And then we basically use that as a map to decode not just the person, but the person's life as well, and how things intertwine from that perspective. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be going over 8 more of those. And if you have additional questions, you would like to book a private consult, or you would like to join me for some astrology classes, you can always hit me up at my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. Meanwhile, we're going live on Facebook and Instagram, and I will post the replay on our YouTube channel. So look for that link in the Facebook live stream. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first chart. Oh, we got to pop open a fizzy water too. So let's talk about Karen. Karen was born at 8:43 a.m. in Cincinnati. Oh, Karen. Karen, I love it. You've got your ascendant at 18 degrees of Taurus, with Venus in Taurus very close to that ascendant by 4 degrees. That's a lovely placement, Karen. I'm a big fan of that. I think that whenever we have Venus attached to the ascendant, there's an extra note of loveliness. The Venusian loveliness that's your flavor is that Venus in Taurus. So somebody who has that overabundant quality, who's always cooking, always making people feel comfortable, really just a welcomed presence in any room. Not necessarily the motherly presence of Cancer, but just the idea that you're here and you immediately put everybody at ease, because Taurus is that grounded earth sign. It's that fixed earth sign. It really provides a stability, a sense of grounded calmness, a sense of, again, that loveliness of Venus, but in a way that is down to earth, is a good way to think of it. So very big fan of that placement, Karen. Good job. However, those aspects are not necessarily easy for you to see for yourself, are they? Because we have that sun in Aries. That sun in Aries is in the 12th house of hidden enemies. We do have some self-consciousness. We have a lot of self-doubt. We have Mercury in Aries here too, as well as Jupiter in Aries here in the 12th house of hidden enemies, hospitalizations, and karmic healing. So there's a lot of your mental state, a lot of your words that are associated with Mercury tend to be hidden from you. You don't know why you say the things that you say. The things that you would like to say come out very different, and they sometimes offend people without you meaning to offend them. A lack of control of those words is really difficult for that Mercury 12th house placement. Same thing with the sun. We really just need to be aware that 12th house sun in Aries, although sun in Aries is an excellent sign, it's not great because that sense of self is hidden away in the chart. It's in one of the darkest spots of the chart. It's in a place that the ascendant can't see it. It's in what's known as aversion to the ascendant. So there's a big part of who you are that needs to be unlocked through different means. And unfortunately, one of the means that is going to unlock that sense of self is by being in the spotlight. We do have Mars, the ruler of Aries, up in Aquarius in the 10th house of fame and success. And so the more you're actually in the spotlight, the more you'll trigger that sun, which is uniquely qualified to kind of shine a light in the darkness of other people's lives. But only when you're able to be in that center spotlight will you activate that solar placement. Unfortunately, your ascendant in Taurus really doesn't like to be in the spotlight, especially with Venus there. Venus is very self-sufficient. She's not, I'm not going to come to you, you come to me. I'm going to be here regardless, doing my own thing, living life, loving life, providing love to others. I don't need you. And that 10th house is kind of, I need you. I need you to look up at me. I need you to respect me. I need you to witness my greatness. Yeah, that's all that 10th house represents, the highest part of the chart. And your ascendant really doesn't enjoy that, but unfortunately that's part of how you tap into your egoic sense of self and really pull yourself out of that darkness, is by recognizing you have some serious talent, girlfriend. Like it's there for a reason. And I think the less you push away from it and the more you actually embrace, not necessarily shoving yourself into the spotlight every single term, every single chance that you get, but just the idea that you shouldn't fear that space of being recognized for the amazing qualities that you clearly have, and for the ability for you to serve others in a way that you can only have. Like you have Jupiter and Mercury and the Sun and Aries in the 12th. Like that's an ability to reach into people's hearts and people's psyches in a very difficult place. And if you're able to monopolize on that via taking the stage every once in a while, that's great. But that's very different from being a power hungry showboater, trying to, elbow people out of the way so that they get the spotlight. That's not who you are. That's never who you will be. But it is something that you're going to need to get a little bit more comfortable with in order to rectify that sun. And that's a big thing that we talk about in astrology, is not just what placements you have, but how we can work with the placements that are maybe not so ideal, and how we can activate or open different parts of the chart by letting those aspects truly shine. Yeah. We do have some connections with that 10th house, 3rd house, 11th house. So 10th house has that Aquarius, Mars, but it's being ruled by Saturn and Cancer down in the 3rd, which is then subsequently ruled by the moon in Pisces up in the 11th. I think that one of the ways that we can also start to get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of sharing who you are with the world is by watching your siblings. And by watching neighbors and people who are close to you kind of stand in that spotlight. You seem to surround yourself with people who are trying to pull you, trying to show you how to step into your power. It's not necessarily easy for you, but it's easy for them. And because it's easy for them, you can then learn from their experience and step into your power that way as well. That Saturn and Cancer in the 3rd really restricts the voice. It really restricts how we communicate, how we think, how we teach. And but because that Saturn is ruling that 9th house, and that MC is in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher learning, there's a theme in your chart that I think you're going to need to get a lot more comfortable with speaking and working through that. It got a lot easier once you pass 30 and that Saturn return really matured that placement, but it's still not easy for you to step in front of a crowd. It will, however, be easier if you have supportive friends who are also in that space, who can maybe co-present with you or at least support you from the sidelines. Let's see, what else? We've got that 1st house Venus ruling the 6th house of career, health, and pets. And we've got Pluto in Libra here, retrograde, which is that generational planet. The other planets, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, they don't move very fast. Everybody in your generation has that same planetary placement, but where you put that in your chart complex, which house you put that power in, is different for each person. And you've put that Pluto in your 6th house of work, health, and pets. Gives you a lot of untapped resources when it comes to your work environment, things that you're constantly leaving on the table, again, because I think you feel that you're not worthy of them. That's a lie. That's a lie that you tell yourself, Karen, but we need to be aware that that is the truth, that you have a tendency to not grab those opportunities when you're presented with them. However, you do have an amazing work ethic. You would just prefer to be behind the scenes, and unfortunately, that's not what your life has in store for you, honey. We need to work on your voice a little bit better. When we look at that Pluto in the 6th house, we would want to specifically be aware of. This is something that I see a lot with Taurus on the ascendant, Libra in the 6th, and then we have Venus and Pluto, 2 signs that are known for a little bit of stagnation and crystallization. We need to be aware of potential kidney stones. We need to be aware of thyroid lumps. We need to be aware of the body getting a little bit too lazy. Because the body, from a physical perspective, when we look at the zodiac signs, when we see too many stagnant planets in signs that are prone to stagnate or develop congestion, that's just a sign that we would need to be aware. Like if you get chronic lower back pain. It might actually not be lower back pain, especially if it's deep and dull and achy. It could be the kidneys kind of complaining at you. And likewise, because we have Venus and Taurus on the ascendant, thyroid and metabolism is something that you'll need to watch rather heavy as well, which will play into the kidney congestion. So keeping your circulatory system moving, keeping water in your system, and making sure that the kidneys are happy, definitely something to be aware of from a medical perspective. Okay. I think that's a fun summary of Karen's chart. Let's continue to move on. Oh, hi everybody. Hi Albert. Hi Karen. Hi Jennifer. Hi. Yes. So lots of good stuff. Thank you to everybody for jumping on. Karen, I'm glad that you enjoyed that. I'm glad that you enjoyed that read of your chart. If you would like to have your chart featured, those of you who are watching, feel free. Or if you friends, family, people who you have consent with, don't randomly send me your lover's time without their consent. But if you would like to have other people featured and have a mini reading of their own, feel free to send in birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need that exact birth time, and please spell out the month and day for me, especially for those of you who are overseas. That can get a little confusing with the month and days. But yeah, and we'll add them to the queue. Alrighty, let's go ahead and move to chart number 2. We're looking at Natalie. Hey, Natalie, how you doing? We're looking at a 5:30 p.m. birth time in Daytona Beach. Oh, Natalie. Okay. So we have a Cancer ascendant, which makes the moon the ruler of the chart. However, the moon, the sun, and Mercury are over in the 7th house of relationships. Mercury is retrograde. The moon is obviously new, and the sun is at 6 degrees directly opposing the ascendant. And by directly opposing the ascendant, I mean the ascendant is at 6 degrees 45 clicks in. The sun is 6 degrees 47 clicks in. Just a couple seconds, and the ascendant will directly oppose the sun. That's a toxic pattern of over-identifying with relationships, Natalie. So when we look at your relationships in general, you constantly craving identity through the relationship that you think you want. That's part of your unique makeup. It makes your self-esteem very, very low unless you're in a partnership with somebody. And that level of craving for partnership is a little bit toxic. And I know that with that Cancer ascendant and the moon ruling your chart, all you really want to do is care for people. And all you really want is somebody who's able to receive all the love that you have to give. And I totally get that. Honey. But another part of it is, you think that somebody else is able to pull the feelings out of you. And to some degree that's true, but that doesn't necessarily need to be a life partner. That Saturn Taurus up in the 11th, which is retrograde, you naturally have a hard time making friends because all you're looking for is a spouse, not people to hang out with and have a good time. And what about your intellectual curiosity? And what about your creativity? You're so creative, honey. You don't need somebody in your life to be you, is a good way to say it. And although you define yourself as well largely by how well you can take care of your pack, how well you can kind of take care of the others that you surround yourself with, I don't think that it's a necessary thing for you to have a significant other in order to do. So that's just something to be aware of. Because your moon is new in the chart, your emotions tend to be hidden even from yourself. And it does help to have people surrounding you in order to pull those feelings out so that they don't get congested. So I would highly recommend that you do work in crowds or work with large groups of people, just because the social interaction is good for your natal chart. But don't think that, don't walk into the room and prioritize who's going to be your significant other, who's going to be your husband, your wife. That's not necessarily what is needed in your chart. Yeah. We do have this 5th house 3-planet pileup. So we have Mars as well as Venus and Jupiter all in that 5th house in Scorpio. And Saturn is in between Mars and Venus. as well as Jupiter. I think especially having Venus and Mars in the fifth house of sexuality brings a great abundance of sexual energy into the chart. I think especially because Mars is in Scorpio, its proper placement. There's a lot of sexual need in the chart. And I think there's also, not just from a physical perspective, but from a creative perspective. Like there's this need to reproduce. There's this need to share your creative urges, to take something from nothing and make it into a thing. And that's a really good, I think, healthy drive to have. But again, with that seventh house placement, a spouse isn't just a baby making machine either, not just a sex machine. It's somebody who you're trying to get in your life for the long haul, not necessarily somebody who's going to just help you fulfill these urges. And I think that the more you can start to understand your chart requires you to fulfill your own urges first, and then whatever comes along comes along. It's not necessarily about finding that other half, quote unquote, but your chart is specifically saying, look, I have a lot to give, way too much to give. I need people to give it to, but that you don't need to give it to one person. You can give it to many people. You have so much in your chart that's really, really well placed. But there's also this lack of confidence, this victim mentality, this over-identification with relationships that keeps bugging me about your chart. And I think that we really need to be aware that the goal is not to strap somebody down to a table and force them to receive your love. That's not the idea of your chart at all. Instead, I think it's about really spreading your love thin. Because it does tend to be thick. It does tend to be very potent. You love very, very boldly. And so with that, it's very much about understanding that everybody can get a piece of what you have to give. You don't need to just bottle yourself into one person. Same thing with Venus and Mars coming together in the fifth house. That's one of my big markers for bisexuality. Jupiter being here in Scorpio just brings a lot to the table. And especially whenever we have a water sign and the ruler of that water sign in the fifth house, that does indicate a lot of fertility markers too. But the issue with all of this energy in the fifth house opposing your Saturn in the 11th is, again, we need to understand that you're not just here to have your desires met, you're also here to build lasting relationships. So don't think that the one night stands, don't think that the sexual energy, don't think that the creativity is just about the one and done. It's not about just making the art piece and then throwing it into a gallery and being like, ooh, I did it. I did the thing. No, it's about constantly tapping that creativity through the exchange that you have with other people. And those other people don't need to be just a one and done. They don't need to be your life partner and nobody else gets in after that. There is an ebb and flow. There is a give and take, and there is a community that's waiting for you that I think is really, really important to understand in your chart. Writing and teaching is something that you have a natural power and talent with, because we have that Mercury in Capricorn retrograde in that third house of teaching, but there is Pluto's here, so it's something that you're not really going to appreciate until halfway through the life. Around 50, we have that shift of like, oh yeah, I get it. I understand what it means to be a teacher and what it means to forge relationships through the teaching process. But we also have this really creative edge to you. So I think that maybe if you taught something that's a little bit more creative, maybe if you taught art, maybe if you worked with some of those watery placements, and you really were able to investigate the love of love that you have in your chart and bring that into the teaching dynamic, I think you'd find a lot more fulfillment. It's not the fact that you teach, it's what you teach and how you teach that really is able to work with, again, a job, but turn it into a passion based on the context of that job. Yeah, we need to inject more creativity into the work for sure, because that fifth house is lighting up the sixth, that Jupiter and Scorpio ruling the sixth house of work. There's just a lot of stuff in your chart that keeps pointing back to the need to work with those fifth house placements and understand what it means to be a creative instructor, what it means to be a relationship builder, what it means to be somebody who has a lot to give, but also does not give it to one person, or isolates people based on what they can receive. Yeah, it's really just about being open to the relationships and experience of life in general. Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Bridget. If you would like to submit your birth date, place, and time, feel free to send me a private message. Yes, I am accepting those birth dates, place, and time. So make sure that all those are exact. I do need that exact time, and we will add you to the queue. Hello, Fatima. Let's go ahead and look at Phaedra. Phaedra was born at 2 a.m. in Miami. And we have a Taurus ascendant, making Venus the ruler. Venus is in Virgo, the sign of its detriment, in the 5th house. So one of the things that I think right off the bat, we have the ruler of the chart in the 5th house. Again, we just talked about the 5th house, but just to recap, it's the house of children, it's the house of parents, it's the house of creativity, it's the house of sexuality. And to have the ruler of the chart here, that's a big focus of Phaedra's life. However, there is Venus in Virgo to contend with. Venus in Virgo is a misplacement of the planet. Venus doesn't like Virgo because Virgo tells Venus what to do. Venus doesn't like rules. Venus likes to be a goddess who is in charge of her whole life and who's just a badass boss bitch. However, Virgo comes over and says, no, there are rules. We have compliance standards. You cannot show your titties in public, Venus. And Venus doesn't like that. And so when we see a Venus in Virgo in the 5th, there's, I think, a struggle with female sexuality. I think there's a struggle with maybe being too prudish. I think there's a struggle with knowing how beauty works, but also trying to disguise that beauty, like having volume to the body but wearing shapers, having a beautiful face but wearing too much makeup. You know, that kind of thing. That Virgo steps in and tries to control that Venus in a way that's not necessarily ideal. Because this is in the house of children, earth signs, very, very fertile. Venus in the 5th house, always a good marker for fertility. But we do have a little bit of an issue with Venus and Virgo and children being a little bit difficult. Again, trying to control too much of that uncontrollable nature when it comes to kids. So I think great nanny, great to control other people's kids, not necessarily good for your own children because you try to be too hard on them. Yeah, so maybe drop them at a relative's house, give them a good grandma to take care of them. We do have that Mercury in Leo and the Sun in Leo in the 4th house, again of family. Family, very important to Phaedra's chart. That Mercury in Leo though is ruling the 5th house. And so that's another idea of there's a lot of family in Phaedra's chart. It's just so present. Also the family being very loud, the family being very boisterous, the family embodying those soul in Leo, that sun in Leo quality of just being very radiant, a very beautiful bunch, a very rowdy bunch, a very loud and colorful and happy and expressive and joyous and catering and talented. You know, all those things that Leo really represents are what you were gifted with, you know, Phaedra, from a family dynamic. And I think that that's a beautiful place for the family to kind of come together. But when it comes to you raising your own children, they made it look a lot easier than you think. And that's a little bit difficult with your personality structure because, again, you tend to hamper that creativity at first instinct when we really need to allow it to flow. Don't worry about the rough edges, honey, because those rough edges are what make you artistic, give you a little bit of spice, individuality, you know. We do have that moon in Aquarius conjunct the MC in the 10th, Saturn in Libra in the 6th house, ruling it. You've got a killer work ethic, honey. And you're a little bit too attached to fame, little bit too idealist when we look at, you know, I'm going to make it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make my mark on the world. This is going to happen if I just work hard enough. Ooh, girl, you know who you remind me of? You remind me of Tiana from Princess and the Frog. I'm almost there. Like I see you in this chart, girl. It's so funny. Because that not only is she my favorite Disney princess, as somebody who identifies as a workaholic, I totally get it. But the process of that moon in Aquarius being ruled by Saturn in the sixth, it's just, you want so much to succeed, and unfortunately you lose the family in the process. Like you're trying to push so hard away from them and away from, you know, what was to what should be in your mind, but that's not necessarily the most important value that I think that your life can bring you. Don't think that getting to the top of the mountain is where it's at. That grass will always be greener. And I speak from personal experience with that. Once you get to the top, it's very lonely there, especially with that moon in Aquarius. The more you push away, the more you realize, oh man, I really had it good back when I was surrounded by people who were really self-identified and could teach me how to be myself without being them, and who really were able to support me. You know, I think part of your hot cold nature of, you know, you just want to escape and cool down for a second. You just want to repress some of those uncontrollable urges that your chart brings forward. But once you repress them, you realize, man, that's actually kind of what makes me human. Again, the rough parts are where it's at, girlfriend, and that's really kind of what your chart is asking you to do, is allow yourself to be rough. Like, don't stop the strive. I respect the hustle for sure, you know, but don't let the hustle get in the way of what's really important. So then we have this Jupiter in Sagittarius, as well as Uranus in Sagittarius, Neptune in Sagittarius, South Node in Sagittarius in the 8th house. There's a lot of, and all of them are retrograde, which is absolutely ridiculous. Death is very difficult in your chart. Taxes, estates, financial problems as well, very, very interesting in your chart. Money issues, entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship that often leaves you feeling like you should have never done it in the first place. It's going out on your own can be really tricky, and that's why you need support of connection, family, and relationships. Is if you're trying to do it all by yourself, then you're going to get fleeced by people who know more than you do. And that's one of those sayings is, you know, if somebody has intelligence and the other person has money, the person with the intelligence is going to end up with the money. The person with the experience is going to end up with the money. So I think that if you were to stick around your tribe, you were to stick around the people that actually make you comfy, and they're able to guide you along the way, maybe connect you with some of those people that you really, really want to meet. That way you won't be fleeced in that way. You won't feel like everything's going retrograde in your own life, going backwards. And you won't feel like when those issues happen, and when you experience things like death, things like financial disaster, scraping the bottom of the barrel, it won't hit you as hard because you'll have the support structure that you need, instead of you pushing away from all of that support and trying to make your life better through distance. Yeah. Cool. So that's a good chunk of Phaedra's chart. I appreciate everybody. Thank you for your messages. I'm starting to get a lot of birth dates, places, and times. Hi, Eden. Yes, so let's keep going. If you would like to send friends, family, yourselves, all I need, birth date, place, time, will add you to the queue, and we will post all these on YouTube. Check out the channel. Check out my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, if you'd like to schedule a consult, and we will keep moving through these charts. Just enjoy this hour every day, where we talk just person to person. Let's talk about Nanette now. Spill the tea on her chart. So we've got 12:35 p.m. in Katanning. Ooh, but we do need to be aware, Nanette. Your ascendant is at 0 degrees Sagittarius, honey. 0 degrees Sag. So that's a couple minutes, 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes. If you were born at 12:33 p.m. or 12:37, or no, 12:33, because it would have to go backwards, you would need to make sure that your birth time is exact. Otherwise, this reading isn't really going to make sense, because we've got a Virgo stellium in your chart, but depending on if it's the 10th house or the 9th house, that's really going to change a lot, because you've got a lot of powerful placements. Where those powerful placements are located Very interesting. Also, you've got the makings of a great astrologer, but if not with the current chart that we're working on. So interesting. Um, well, no, you've got the makings of a good astrologer either way, but it just depends on whether you're that Mars and Leo astrologer or whether that Jupiter and Cancer astrologer. Um, it really comes down to that Sagittarius ascendant, and the moon is in Sagittarius as well. The moon wouldn't make a difference. Your moon is in Sag regardless. So you've got this spunky side, you've got this kind of playful side, you've got this mutable fire energy that's really lovely. So we've got some emotional heat, but that ascendant conjoining the moon gives you a double Sag energy. So although your sun is in Virgo, if your chart time is correct, then one of the things you might be super frustrated with is every time you try to read for Virgo, you're like, this makes no goddamn sense. And that's because it doesn't, honey, because you have your sun and your ascendant in Sagittarius, which is the sign that you should be reading for because that's more accurate to your personal makeup. Your chart ruler is Jupiter in Cancer with a Sag ascending. And that Jupiter in Cancer over in the 8th house of death, taxes, estates, entrepreneurship, it does give you entrepreneurship tendencies. It really does make a lot of good luck in business. I enjoy Jupiter in Cancer because it's in the sign of its exaltation. It's a very lucky planet to begin with, but for you to put it in that 8th house of business, I think that there's good stuff that you could do in that space. You could work really, really well on yourself as an entrepreneur. And you have all of these markers for success in your chart because that Virgo stellium is in the 10th house as of this birth time. Again, stipulation. So we have the sun at 26 degrees Virgo, Uranus at 20 degrees Virgo, Pluto at 18 degrees Virgo, the MC at 16 degrees Virgo, and then Venus at 13 degrees Virgo. Seems to be a theme. Venus rather. We've had 2 Venus in Virgos, Venus in Cancer. No, we haven't had Venus in Cancer. We had Venus in Taurus ruling the chart, so Venus is definitely coming through this morning. Let's see, what else? So that Virgo stellium in the 10th. So the 10th house is that house of career. It's that house of long-term success. It's that house of striving. And for us to have your sun here, you're very charismatic. You naturally have that glow about you. But we do have Uranus and Pluto here. Uranus and Pluto kind of throw a wrench into the plans, and you have this kind of quirky underworld vibe that also comes through in a lot of your success and a lot of your spotlight tendencies. The gifts that you share tend to throw people off guard, and they tend to throw people off guard by how you play with being both zany and boundary smashing, but also very restrictive and self-deprecating with that Venus in Virgo. We've already talked about Venus in Virgo, Nanette, with the idea of Venus being controlled or restricted, but then you also have Uranus, which is that planet of unpredictability here, Pluto, which is this untold underworld power that's just very, very potent but unseen. And all of this is happening in your 10th house of career. You've got this showmanship that's so present in your chart, but at the same time, it's coming through in a way that is very unexpected, somewhat dark and restrictive. Let's see what else we have. We have Mercury in Libra. Mercury in Libra in the 11th is a great placement to have. It is ruling that Venus in Virgo. So I think one of the things that this placement speaks towards, at least with it being in the 11th house, is a silver tongue, somebody who can really talk their way out of any situation, especially when it comes to the career space. So you negotiating your own contracts, again, with that entrepreneurial tendency, you're really, really good at that. You don't need somebody telling you what to do. You don't need that manager. You do it all yourself. And it should be that way because there's nobody who has a better Mercury placement than you. That Mercury in Libra in the 11th is just so good at using words to assuage others and large groups. Wouldn't surprise me as well if voice was in the picture because Libra is that sign of beauty and artistry and Mercury is that sign of communication. You also have Aquarius on the 3rd house, which does a double air sign placement on the 3rd house. I mean, it's pretty good for vocal talents and speaking. If that Mars and Leo is correct, then your work will also cause you to travel a lot, because that Sun in Virgo is ruling that Mars and Leo in the ninth house of travel, foreigners, and higher education. Going to school for what you do now as a career, very, very I mean, you knew what you wanted to do, you went for it, and now you're doing it. It's a very classic progression, but all of your signs are in the right place for you to do that. But that Mars and Leo really does ask you to travel the world, to get out of your comfort zone, to push, to maybe study rulers, study power dynamics, to study dictators to a certain degree, using that Mars and Leo power to really ignite that ninth house of spirituality, of travel, higher education, foreigners, that kind of thing. And I think if you were to get into astrology just from a practical standpoint, you'd have a very fierce outlook on astrology. It wouldn't be that Jupiter in Cancer placement in the ninth, which is what I have, which is kind of a calmer, little bit more compassionate, little motherly approach to astrology. Instead, you would be the warlord of the astrology community. That Mars and Leo begs to be seen. It begs for bloodshed. It really wants to use this art, this craft, to cut open any opposing enemies, and that enemy is the darkness of the soul. So there's a lot of good potential there for that. Getting over addiction issues, yeah, I mean, that's a thing. Neptune and Scorpio on the 12th, that's kind of where we want it. And you've already been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. It's not something that you're going to need to struggle with anymore. You've got a handle on that, but just don't suppress that. I think it is part of your work that needs to be talked about. It needs to be explained. And it is something that I think you're uniquely qualified to educate people on. The idea of escapism and substances and escapism being a part of the profession, being a part of what you do now, and not to shame anybody, but to let people know, hey, this is something that I've experienced, and this is something that I hope you don't experience. But maybe if we talk about it together, it will come forward. But again, if your ascendant goes into Scorpio, then we would pull a totally different chart for you, which would put that Neptune very close to the ascendant, and bring those addiction issues very, very forward, that chemical sensitivity very, very forward, and would drastically change the dynamics of the chart. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and continue. Nanette, thank you for that feedback. Let's go into our next chart. Thank you, everybody who's continuing to send messages. My phone and my messenger on Facebook are buzzing. The more charts you send to me, the more we'll do this every day. I don't have enough for today's for tomorrow, I think, so we might space it out a day, but we'll see. Let's look at Milo. Milo was born at 4:29 a.m. in Los Angeles. We have another Venus placement. So this time we have Venus in Gemini at 24 degrees, Ascendant at 21 degrees. So Venus conjunct the Ascendant by 3 degrees, a loose orb. We also have Saturn at 1 degree of Gemini here in the first house, which is an interesting placement. So we have Venus closer to the Ascendant, which is good. Because Venus brings all things that are lovely. She loves to come into a chart and bring forward qualities of grace, qualities of physical beauty as well. But then we also have Saturn here. Saturn in the first house does give you, Mila, this again self-deprecating tendency where your Saturn placement in the first house tells you no. It makes your body a little bit weaker than it should be, thinner than it should be, drier than it should be, a little bit more strict and astringent than it should be, and all of those things. We do have Cancer. We have Sun in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, both in the second house of money, identifying with wealth, beauty, and physical possessions. That's something that the Venus placement doubles down on too. But I think it's important that we understand your chart talks about finance being attached to your self-worth. And that's not necessarily saying I need all of this money in order to survive. But you need to understand that when your bank account goes low, so does your self-esteem. Yeah. So always having a nest egg, always having money put aside so that you don't feel like a total failure. And although that's just self-talk in your own head, and it's not, I mean, there are people in way worse financial situations than you. But just the way that your chart is placed, we need to understand your personal connection to finance is directly connected to your self-esteem and your mental state. So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling out of sorts, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling this, save your money, build up your financial wellness, work a little bit harder, get some money in the bank, and that will really help to boost up your sun and your Mercury, your ego and your mind placement in that second house of finance for sure. So that's nice. We have some other placements here. I'm just thinking about what to tackle first. There's a lot. We have this moon in Libra in the 5th that is connected to Venus and Gemini. Not by trine anymore because they're separated, but there is a distinct rulership. I think voice is something, again, my last second, because that first house is self, Venus is there, which rules beauty, ruling the moon in that 5th house of creativity. Again, there is an idea of voice, of art, of that air element coming forward and being working with sound, working with music, working with that auditory air vibration. I think is really, really cool. But you'll do it in kind of a zany way because we have that Uranus in Libra in that 5th house of creativity. So like as an example, you playing that like a very weird instrument that nobody else plays, like that weird noisemaker thing that you control with your hands. I can't think of the name of it. Theremin. There it is. Yeah, the theremin. That would be a fun little outlet for a creative project. You would also make a really fun mom for sure, because that Uranus, that Venus ruled 5th house is really lovely and compassionate and very graceful and very good around the house. But then when we look at that Uranus placement, it also gives you that spark of fun, that unpredictable edge where you're just like, let's go to the theme park for the weekend. Not necessarily ideal now while we're in quarantine, but you know, the idea of Uranus being that 5th house, it does lend a little bit of unpredictability to your chart, which I find amusing. We do have that Mercury in Cancer ruling that 4th house of family, because we have the family house ruler in the 2nd house of finances, family giving you money and or family taking money from you. There is an exchange of money between family and you that is potentially a little bit toxic. We have Pluto here. It's not going to really mature until about halfway through the life. So I think that from a family perspective, just being aware that family is an investment to a certain degree, and you giving money, you giving time, you giving resources to family, or likewise them to you. You know, that's about building a structural bond to make sure that everybody is safe from a financial perspective, but also that there's a pool of resources that stays between the family. Yeah. That energetic connection to the 4th house of family, 2nd house of finance. We have Mars in Aquarius up in the north, up with the North Node in the 9th house. That's interesting. So right now, at the time of this recording, we have Mars in Aquarius and we have Venus in Gemini. Venus is about to go retrograde in your 1st house, Milo. So changing your physical appearance is something that will be coming down the pipeline if you haven't felt that already. But we're changing and then reversing and then changing with the retrograde in Venus. Plus we have Mars in the 9th house right now, lighting up your higher education, spirituality, foreigners, travel. It's really itching you itching you hardcore to like get out and do stuff, and now is the worst possible time for that to be happening. But because that Saturn in the first house is ruling that ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality, that's a big part of your makeup, because you've put that identifier in your chart. So I think that you're very driven in those aspects, and something that you're very passionate about, because Mars is here, and it's something you should pay attention to, because it is North Node territory for you. It is where you're going. It is a part of your chart that's kind of like the north of your personal compass, and that's a good thing. We do have Jupiter in Scorpio here, retrograde in the 6th, 27 degrees, being ruled by that Mars in the 9th. How would we interpret that? Interesting. So when we look at the 6th house ruled by a 9th house Mars, working in travel, working in with foreigners, working in higher education, working in spiritual pursuits, that's all on the table with that chart connection. Jupiter normally makes things big, but when Jupiter goes retrograde, it almost makes things too big. Or it makes things way too small. It either shrinks things down, like that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids thing, or it makes things really, really big, but terribly out of control. It's basically Jupiter gone wrong, or Jupiter going backwards, kind of the retrograde perspective. So we need to be aware that stuff going wonky at work, stuff going weird with, from a health perspective, the growth of cysts, PCOS, in the reproductive space, the colon, the sinuses, the bladder, constant bladder infections, that kind of thing. I see a lot of that with medical stuff. And it's all related on your nervous system, honey. If you just calm down, the body won't feel so agitated. But those anxiety things with the health stuff, very, very connected. But that Jupiter from a 6th house perspective of work, is really puzzling to me. I can't seem to put my finger on it, but Scorpio doesn't really like to be seen. So maybe that's a part of the chart that we would need to delve into one-on-one for sure. We do have that seventh house Neptune retrograde in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde in the 6th. That's an interesting placement, because it means spouse normally connected to work stuff, you going into work with spouse in the same field, adopting pets together, having some of the same health issues, or working in the health profession. But that Neptune, wherever Neptune goes, there's a sense of wishy-washiness. There's a sense of no, we're not going there. Okay. But when we look at the relationship in general, Neptune being there, not necessarily ideal for things that are concrete. So make sure that your partners are aware that although it's fun to have a fun life, it's not ideal to always be late for everything. It's not ideal to always try to change the subject. It's not ideal to try to avoid things that need to be talked about. Yeah. So that's that. Thank you everybody for jumping on and sending me messages. We'll keep going. I'm slow today. I'm spending too much time on these charts. Let's look at Dre. Dre was born 8:14 p.m. in Torrance. Scorpio Ascendant. Woo! Scorpio Ascendant ruled by Mars and Capricorn in the 3rd. Oh, that's fun, Dre. So we've got a natural inclination to the 3rd house topics of writing, teaching, and communication. Yeah, that's fun. Also, very close with your siblings. Kind of a neighborhood person, just very, very in the community in that way, something that you very much enjoy. Really strong worker, really great work ethic. We've got that Sun in Aries ruled by that Mars in Capricorn, 2 signs in their exaltation. What? Great. So we've got Mars in the 3rd, which is that writing, teaching, communication, ruling that Sun in Aries, both in their exaltations in that 6th house of work. That's some great placement, Dre, for sure. For sure. That's awesome. And that sun in Aries is ruling that 10th house of success and career. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of that. But despite this ability for you to potentially be famous and for you to get really, really good at what you do and to know your work inside and out and for you to be a specialist in the field and to just really be amazing at what you do, like crazy good, but also, again, like fame potentially or working with those who are famous is part of the makeup of your chart. Dude, Venus in Pisces too? That's 3 planets that you have in the sign of their exaltation. That's ridiculous. Your chart's almost as good as mine. Then we have that moon in Cancer up in the 9th. Damn, you've got some great placements. But one of the things that we need to talk about your chart is the idea of relationships and family being so important to you as a person. That's actually something that you're really here to learn, although you have all these talent markers in your chart and you have all of this potential to be, again, very, very, very much in the spotlight, very good at what you do. You have all of this really great energy about your chart that makes you very successful as a person. What you're striving towards this time around is actually to nail down the family dynamic. That North Node in Aquarius being ruled by Saturn and Taurus in the 7th, that's like the only thing that you need is a stable family. Like that's the one thing that you would prefer. And I think part of that is because you were exposed to that at an early age or exposed to that desire at an early age, making it just so important for you to repeat that cycle of I must have stability. I must have stability. There is nothing more in your life that you crave more than that Saturn and Taurus energy, that fixed earth on top of earth, as well as Mercury and Taurus, that practical communication, that down-to-earth loving through just a meshing of ideas and really being on the same page with the person that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with. Like it's all very lovely to tell you the truth. But I think we need to understand that your skills, your talents are meant to fuel that journey. And at a certain point, you're going to need to say no to all of those, to the degree to which you can become successful. Leaving opportunities on the table, making sure that you don't get swept away by the current of your own life, and really putting down roots as the first priority is very much the essence of your chart. Having that moon in Cancer in the 9th does make you very spiritual. It does make you kind of good at astrology too, interested in it at least. That moon in Cancer in the 9th also loving to take care of foreigners. Like you do great on the road. You do great as an Airbnb host. It's just something that you get. You empathize very, very quickly with people, and you know them often more than they know themselves, especially with that Scorpio ascendant. So you tend to profile people very well. You tend to be in their heads, in their hearts before they know it. That's also what kind of makes you really good at your job, for sure. We do have Neptune and Sagittarius and Jupiter and Sagittarius retrograde in the 2nd house, both not great places for finance. So we do have money issues in the chart. We have, although again, Jupiter and Sag is a great placement, but Jupiter and Sag retrograde and very close to Neptune, the planet that makes everything's muddy and confusing. Not necessarily ideal. We'd want somebody else to look at your books, Dre. We want somebody else to manage your finances. We'd want, especially if you do unlock some of that fame, that fortune, we'd want a money manager, we'd want a CPA, we'd want an investment person working beside you instead of you trying to do it all yourself, because it's not something that you're good at, and we need to bow down to where we are weak, and in your chart, the 2nd house is one of those weaker placements. But I mean, you're super creative. So it's the stereotypical thing of, you're so creative, you're so good at what you do, but you're terrible with the finances that you earn from what you do. You also couldn't really give two shits about the money. It's not about the money. It's about the family. It's about doing what you love. Those things that your chart just speaks to in spades. So if we get somebody to come in with the finance and really, really lock down some of the financial wellness, you'd be able to provide for your family a lot better instead of you wasting the money and trying to do it yourself, and also respecting the fact that although the fame is important and the fame will make you good at what you do and you'll be really excellent at it, you will have to say no to some of those opportunities in order to sacrifice, literally make a sacred cutting away of those things that are not that really grounded family dynamic that you enjoy so much, and want to build a life with in your chart. Cool. Oh goodness, 2 charts and only 5 minutes to do it. Let's talk about Tom. We'll probably go over. Sorry for those of you on Instagram, because Instagram cuts me off in an hour. But let's talk about Tom's chart. Hey Tom, how you doing? 2:05 a.m. in Wynwood. Alrighty. So, Leo stellium. Well, not stellium, technically. But we have the Ascendant in Gemini. We have the Sun in Leo. The Moon is also in Leo. And Mercury is also in Leo, all in that 3rd house. Super strong placements for writing, teaching, communication, with Mercury as the Lord of the chart. Mercury and Gemini are both known for their communicative tendencies, their ability to speak very well. Natural born teachers, they also rule the 3 M's: magic, medicine, and money. All good things with Mercury being the Lord of the 1st, and then in that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. But you've also got the Sun here, you've also got the Moon here. It's really just such a core identity of who you are, this writing, teaching, communication bit. And also potentially being really well recognized for it. Unfortunately, you won't be, well, yeah, I mean, you'll be recognized for it, but just not in the way that you expect. But the big thing is that you love it and you identify with it and you're really good at it and you make it very flamboyant and creative, and you're really able to tease a lot of the words to make them jump off the page and radiate and do all those Leo-esque things. We do have Venus in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, both benefics in the 2nd house of finance. Money is something that you're just naturally kind of good at. We do have an opposition with Saturn, so money is not going to come. Money's not going to be easy for the first 30 years of life. We do need to be aware of that. But in the long term, you do have very strong financial markers in your chart, especially with that Jupiter in Cancer, the sign of its exaltation, ruling the 10th house of success. So there are really, really great placements in your chart that indicate a lot of financial wealth. But we need to get past that first Saturn return, which it looks like you kind of already had, because we have Saturn at 21 degrees retrograde in Capricorn. So this year really taught you a lot about the money stuff. In fact, it's still teaching you a lot about the money stuff. Let me tell you something, Tom. It's not going to get any easier until about December 21st, around the solstice, because everybody's going through this pile up in Capricorn right now. Pluto's involved, Jupiter's involved, Saturn's involved. Really heavy shit, like terribly heavy shit. But we're all taking it into a different place in our chart. You're taking it into the 8th house of business, death, taxes, estates. So it's really making it hard for you to make a living right now in terms of being on your own. You're having to rely very heavily on others at this point. And that's okay. That's okay, honey. But what I think we need to be aware of is once everything moves into your 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, there's going to be this push of like, this exposed a lot of weaknesses. I need to double down on my studies. And I really need to learn how to be the best that I can, especially with all of that opposing your sun. All of the placements that are going to happen around the 1st of 2021 for you are going to trigger a lot of identity crisis. They're going to trigger a lot of who am I, why am I here, and how can I get better at who I am, and really challenge that ego in a very productive way. I'm excited to see what that brings forward. Although it's going to suck and it's going to rip your heart out and it's going to make you feel like you're nothing. You're not nothing, Tom. I think that your chart is too good your chart's too good to fail, really. It's too creative, it's too benefic, it's too helpful. But but we have hidden aspects of the chart that can always be refined. And that's one of the struggles with people who have natural talent is it takes a while for them to realize how good they actually are at what they do. And me as a perfect example, we have somewhat similar placements in a couple different areas. And I've been studying astrology for 14 years before I started doing like in-depth consults and doing these live streams and making it sound like I just popped out of nowhere and started doing this astrology stuff. And the same thing's going to happen to you, Tom, with your natal chart placements, with your sun, Mercury, the moon, all in that third house of writing, teaching, communication. It's going to challenge you in a way that says, you're really, really good at this, but you need to learn how to do it better. You need to refine your craft. You need to go back to the grindstone and hammer out some of these flaws, because there are flaws, but it's the flaw of being too good that really trips people up a lot with that natural talent. Because if they're too good at what they do, then they get lazy and they don't necessarily pursue the schooling because they're so talented. So that's something that I think will challenge you the first of the year, but it's going to be a welcome challenge and definitely will make you better for sure. Money issues always going to be something that you need to work on. It is a hidden enemy for you with Venus ruling that Mars in Taurus in the 12th. Potentially having issues with money in general, wealth issues, resenting the fact that you need money, but that you're good at money, you're good at business, you understand it, it's just you hate it. And there's a big kind of push-pull there from that perspective. Because we have connections with Jupiter in Cancer and Sagittarius on the ascendant of the 7th house, your spouse potentially may be very wealthy, and you might marry into a very rich family because of that. Jupiter in the sign of its exaltation, ruling the 7th house of relationships via the 2nd house of finance, and Venus in Cancer here in the 2nd house of finance would not surprise me again if the spouse that you choose is not only very lovely, but also very wealthy. And that's part of the dynamic of your chart as well. And it might even support you in some of your creative endeavors. But money is something that you specifically, although you know how to hustle for it, it is a difficult force that you will need to learn how to master in your life, because it's something that I think gives you the ability to access all of the higher education that you know you deserve. However, it does come at a price, and what price you're willing to pay for those things is going to be totally up to you. But remember, you get what you pay for. Okay, one more chart and we are over time. So I need to make this quick, but let's go to Tempest. So Tempest was born 1:14 p.m. in Brooklyn. Brooklyn, love the city. Alrighty. We have a Virgo ascendant with Mars at 0 degrees of Virgo. That's an interesting placement, Tempest. You waited until Mars was at 0 degrees, 19 clicks into Virgo to put it in the first house. You wanted some of that intensity, and I think that Tempest is a great name for you to choose because of that. That Mars and Virgo energy is very much the farmer archetype. It's somebody who knows how to work with the earth. It's somebody who knows how to dig their fingers deep into the soil and feel moisture and nutrient levels and bring about that fierceness through great efforts of production and labor. But it is somebody who is a laborer. And that Mars in Virgo, Mars takes that energy, that drive, that action, and puts it into the focused, resource manipulating, and kind of control freak tendencies of Virgo that you need in order to manage a bunch of crops, and that ascendant in Virgo is just really cool that you put the Mars there. But you do have your chart ruler, Mercury in Gemini in its proper placement. Ooh, in Kazemi in the 10th? What, girl? This is fun. Okay, so we have Mercury in Gemini, which is its proper sign, and it's at 23 degrees conjoining the sun. Whenever we have a planet conjoining the sun, it's known as a Kazemi. It's known as a Kazemi. It's known as the planet being in the heart of the sun. And this also comes paired with the concept of combustion. So when a planet is within about 7.5 degrees of the sun on either side of it, it's known as combust. It means that those planets are not seen. The light of those planets can't touch the earth, can't touch the body. And so those qualities are hidden. However, when a planet enters a 1-degree conjunction with the sun, it's known as a Kazemi, and it actually backlights the planet to double its qualities. It's kind of like sitting in the heart of the sun. It's sitting in the throne of that sunroom, and really just basking in the power of it. And you've put the Lord of your chart in that Kazemi position in the 10th house of success. You know you're destined for greatness, almost too much. So we do have a little bit of an ego trip tendency. This is something that I see with a lot of the Kazemi and the 10th charts that I read for. It is something that we need to be aware of, with just making sure that the ego doesn't come off too strong, making sure that you don't temper your skills, because again, you're amazing. You have this gift with words, you have this gift with writing, teaching, communication that Mercury and Gemini both have, but that uber Gemini quality and that super Virgo nature tends to come off as really intense with the sun backing it. So we just need to be aware that people aren't really going to be able to handle you for the first couple minutes until they get used to you, and then they'll be able to see, oh, this is what she's doing, not necessarily trying to be so uber Gemini, so uber Virgo, but we do have that as kind of a natural tendency in your chart. Interesting. We just talked about Jupiter in Cancer and Venus in Cancer, and we have them again, this time in the 11th house of relationships, of friendships and social groups. Oh, and the moon is in Libra with a mutual reception to Venus. That's an interesting formation, my dear. I love that. Friends giving you money, for sure. When we look at the moon at 2 degrees conjoining that north node as well, one of the things that you're really here to learn how to do is master the finance game. Emotionally, money resonates with you very strongly. It is something that you'll get better and better at over time, because Pluto is here, especially after 50. But that Venus in Cancer in mutual reception with that moon in Libra, and Venus in Cancer ruling the North Node, there's going to be a really strong connection between friends and finances, always. Giving things to friends, but also receiving things to friends, gift giver by nature, but then also from a financial stability perspective, your social network will support you financially. So social media is something that you should definitely be doing if you're not already. Get on that TikTok, get on that Instagram, girls, speak your piece, because when you speak, people listen. That is that Mercury Kazemi up in the 10th for sure. And you've got that powerful strength with that Mars in the 1st that really speaks towards a lot of great stuff, really great stuff. So the more friends you have, the more powerful you'll be, the more money you'll make, and you'll be able to use those things. And I think that this also works in your favor, because social media tends to tone down that personality, which can kind of hit us like a wave when we're physically in person. So when you go to those platforms and you really speak your piece, there's a level of buffer that comes in between you and the person watching. And although they'll still be able to feel that energy, it won't be as in your face as meeting somebody with that Mercury Kazemi up in the 10th of success. Let's see what else. Working with people who are naturally in that 12th house situation of hidden enemies. Making hidden enemies at work would be the lower end of that energetic spectrum. So just be aware. You have a tendency to make enemies in the workplace, but that's natural for people with a powerful personality. You just put a target on your back because you're so awesome. It's a thing. Then we look at that Saturn placement in Leo in the 12th, ruling that 6th house of work, health, pets, potential spine deviations from a health perspective, issues with the heart, the spine, the eyes from a medical perspective, especially those things that put you in the hospital. That might be a scoliosis, that might be a deformity of the joints. We need to just be aware of that medical placement. but you working with people in hospitals, you working with people who are in that life transition stage, potentially in jails, potentially in asylums, potentially in places where people go to transform, people go to be locked away to a certain extent. You have a unique ability to work with those people, and to be very well known for it. So I think the more you lean into that liminal space of being able to hack the transition for certain people, it'll really work out in your benefit for sure. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we covered a lot in Tempest chart, so that's good stuff. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. We're at about an hour and 8 minutes, went a little bit longer than normal. Just had a lot to say. We had a lot of very fun charts this time around. If you would like to submit your chart, feel free to private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. We'll get you in the queue. Send your friends and family my way. I read for children, spouses. If you would like something a little bit more private, we can always do things like a synastry chart. I can read for pets as well, but I am a private consulting astrologer too, so you can always find reading resources and private consultations requests at my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, as well as online classes if you'd like to learn. But for now, we will end the live stream with my favorite phrase: may the stars be ever in your favor.